9. Regina Harrison. When her roommate became ensnared in a mental health crisis in 2021, 33-year-old Regina Harrison of Nanaimo, British Columbia, tried to support the woman any way she could, even when it meant putting her own safety on the line. She noticed that her troubled friend had a shotgun inside their shared apartment during the early morning hours and didn't think twice about trying to wrestle the weapon out of the woman's grasp. Unfortunately, though, the gun went off during the struggle, and Harrison was shot in the face and hand. Her condition was so dire that she and her partner, Jason Scully, weren't sure if she was going to survive. They even said their goodbyes to each other while waiting for paramedics to arrive. But thankfully, Harrison pulled through. However, she was left with lasting injuries which required her to undergo intensive reconstructive surgeries. She also permanently lost vision in her right eye. Despite the extent of her wounds, Harrison said that she did what she felt was necessary and would react the same way if she had to do the situation over. 8. Jefferson Heavner. As a major blizzard descended upon the American East Coast in early 2016, a Good Samaritan named Jefferson Heavner noticed a stranded vehicle on the side of the road in Catawba County, North Carolina. The 26-year-old father of one and a handful of other civilians stopped to check on the driver and see if he needed any help. But the man behind the wheel, later identified as 27-year-old Marvin Jacob Lee, was acting belligerent and unusual. Unsure of how to respond to the situation, the bystanders told Lee that they were going to call for help and let the police handle things, at which point the disgruntled driver pulled a gun and opened fire on the group. Heavner was struck by a bullet and collapsed to the ground as Lee continued shooting and ran to his car. Lee initially refused to exit his vehicle, but eventually surrendered to the demands of a SWAT team. In the end, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 14 to 19 years in prison. 7. Shantavia Reik. When a close friend needed help escaping an abusive relationship in September 2023, 26-year-old schoolteacher Shantavia Reik went to the woman's apartment complex in Spring, Texas. Both Shantavia and her dog were shot dead in the building's parking garage during the early morning hours. And unfortunately, police arrived at the scene to find the slain woman's body riddled with gunshot wounds. According to authorities, Reik was killed by 28-year-old Dimitri Humphrey, the boyfriend of the woman she was trying to help. Her friend survived the incident, which law enforcement described as a domestic violence dispute gone terribly wrong. Humphrey fled the scene in his vehicle, and in addition to being wanted for murder, there were several unrelated warrants out for his arrest at the time. Police tracked him down at a park in Houston following an 11-day manhunt and attempted to take him into custody. But they were forced to return fire when he pulled out a gun and began shooting at them. The suspect attempted to run away during the exchange of gunfire, but he died in the shootout. Had Humphrey survived, he would have faced a capital murder charge in connection with Reik's death. Harris County Police Chief Ed Gonzalez credited Reik with giving her own life in order to save her friend. The senseless tragedy serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers of domestic violence. 6. Josh Krueger. 39-year-old freelance journalist Josh Krueger was mercilessly gunned down inside his Philadelphia home during the early morning hours one day in October 2023. He was shot 7 times in the chest and abdomen and was simply left to die. Later that week, authorities named 19-year-old Robert Davis as their prime suspect in the case. A police spokesperson said that Davis and Krueger knew each other and that Krueger was trying to help the teen, while authorities were reluctant to release many details. The spokesperson said that Davis appeared to have a possible history of homelessness and that investigators were working to establish a feasible motive for the crime. Davis remained at large for several weeks before he and his mother arranged for him to surrender to police at his home in South Philly. Shortly after taking the suspect into custody, authorities announced plans to charge him with murder. While law enforcement has continued to stick to its belief that Krueger was trying to help Davis, allegations of a more complicated relationship have surfaced. An anonymous source told the Philadelphia Inquirer that detectives have found explicit photos and messages in Krueger's phone, which indicates, at the very least, that the two were entangled in a physical relationship. At least 2 of Davis's family members claimed that Davis told them Krueger had threatened to post incriminating photos and videos of him online. The teen's loved ones further alleged that the 2 men had a history dating back several years, and that Davis struggled to keep both his drug addiction and his relationship with Krueger a secret, while also battling mental illness. For now, the details of what really happened and whether the allegations against Krueger are true remain shrouded in mystery. Davis's family admitted that they only learned of his relationship with the victim shortly before his arrest. They knew that Robert had been seeing someone, but the teen reportedly told his loved ones that his partner was a woman. With so much of the relationship kept hidden for so long, the real story has yet to be uncovered. 5. Michaela Pas and Adam Simji. 22-year-old Adam Simji and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Michaela Pas, were driving through Talladega National Forest in Alabama one day in 2022 when a woman who appeared to be stranded flagged them down and asked if they would help her jumpstart her broken-down car. The pair were eager to help, but they were unable to get the vehicle started. When the couple attempted to troubleshoot the problem using YouTube videos, the woman, later identified as Yasmin Hyder, suddenly became violent and robbed Simji and Paulus at gunpoint. Hyder forced the couple to march into the woods before shooting Simji in a dying effort to protect his girlfriend. Simji pulled out his own gun and returned fire, striking Hyder multiple times. Simji died from his injuries while Hyder called out to another woman named Crystal Pinkins, who was lurking in the woods nearby and had been watching the entire time. Pinkins fled into the woods shortly thereafter, giving Michaela a chance to dial 911. The young woman tried administering CPR to her boyfriend, but it was too late to save him. Emergency responders rushed Hyder to the hospital while deputies searched for Pinkins. Eventually, they found her 6 hours later and ordered her to the ground, at which point her son emerged from the woods holding a loaded gun. Thankfully, though, the deputies managed to take the weapon without any more people being hurt. According to law enforcement, Hyder and Pinkins had been living together in the wilderness with Pinkins' son, after abandoning their lives several months earlier to travel together. Both women were federally charged with murder, kidnapping, and robbery. And Pinkins faces an additional charge of child endangerment. Pinkins was convicted of murder, robbery, and unlawful use of a firearm during a crime of violence. She's scheduled to be sentenced in early 2024 and could face life in prison. Hyder, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, robbery, and kidnapping, and was sentenced to 35 years behind bars. 4. Michael and Chanel Keeley. In 2012, Michael Keeley and his wife, Chanel, arrived at a rental property they owned in Rex, Georgia, to find the back door open and a window broken. They discovered more vandalism when they entered the home, including holes in the wall and a vanity mirror that had been removed from its usual place. And upon taking a closer look, the couple found 8 bags of methamphetamine. Just a day earlier, federal and local authorities had arrested 3 tenants who lived at the property for having drugs in their vehicle. After searching the apartment, law enforcement turned it back over to the Keeleys, who found the meth when they stopped at the property the next morning to clean it up and prepare it for new renters. The couple called the police to report the discovery and were shocked when they were arrested on suspicion of tampering with drug evidence. They later claimed that the arresting officer refused to believe that the drugs didn't belong to them. The Keeleys were released on bail after spending 2 days in the Clayton County Jail. And the charges were eventually dropped after the case gained widespread media attention. A local police spokesperson told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the incident was a federal case, even though federal authorities weren't involved in the couple's arrests. The circumstances surrounding the incident and the source of the ensuing confusion unfortunately remain unclear. 3. Joseph Walker. On the evening of October 25, 2023, a gunman, later identified as 40-year-old Army reservist Robert Card, opened fire on members of the public at a bowling alley in Lewiston, Maine. This unfortunate incident resulted in the deaths of 7 people. After the shooting, Card then drove to a restaurant 4 miles away and continued shooting at strangers, killing 8 people at the scene and wounding 3 others who later died from their injuries. The restaurant's bar manager, 56-year-old Joseph Walker, had grabbed a butcher knife and tried to stop Card in the middle of the carnage. Sadly, though, he was unsuccessful, and he was among the victims who died in the barrage of gunfire after being shot twice in the stomach. As America comes to grips with its latest mass shooting, many have hailed Walker as a hero for his bold and brave decision to stand up to a crazed gunman who was armed with an assault rifle and shooting indiscriminately at the crowd. But Walker's willingness to give his life in hopes of saving others doesn't make his death any less painful for his father, Leroy Walker, who told People magazine that the way his son died actually made the news even harder to take. Lewiston's residents were ordered to shelter in place while a large-scale manhunt ensued. Authorities found Robert Card dead in the woods nearly 2 days later and are still working to determine his reason for committing the horrific mass murder. According to news sources, Card's fellow Army Reserve trainees had noticed in July of 2023, just 3 months before the shooting, that he was behaving erratically. They called the police and reported that Card was hearing voices and had threatened to shoot up a military base. He spent 2 weeks at a military hospital and was released, but his mental issues seemed to continue. Card's sister-in-law told NBC News that the suspect had started to complain of hearing voices earlier that year after he began wearing a hearing aid. The investigation into the disturbing tragedy is ongoing as the community struggles to come to grips with the horror that they recently lived through. 2. Donald Collins. 25-year-old Donald Collins was driving home from work during the early morning hours one day in August 2023 when he noticed a disabled minivan along a highway in Dallas County, Texas. A tow truck had collided with the minivan, causing it to spin out into the middle of the road. It then came to a stop in the direct path of oncoming traffic. By the time Collins pulled over to offer his assistance, the tow truck driver had fled the scene. Collins stood by the minivan in an attempt to help the stranded family, but both he and the vehicle were struck by an SUV. Emergency responders rushed Collins to the hospital, but he unfortunately died from his injuries. His wife later told local station NBC5 that she knew something was wrong when Collins didn't call her on his way home from work like he had a habit of doing every single day. She became even more worried when he failed to arrive home and when his phone location showed that he was at a local hospital. The terrible news came soon after that. Collins' wife was devastated by the loss of her husband, but she credited him with saving the lives of the people inside the van. The SUV driver, 33-year-old Irma Nelly Martinez-Leal, was charged with intoxication manslaughter and 2 counts of intoxication assault with a vehicle. Several days later, 25-year-old Juan Francisco Garcia turned himself in as the alleged driver of the tow truck that fled the scene after striking the minivan. As a result, he was charged with 1 felony count each of accident involving serious bodily injury and tampering with evidence. But at the moment, both criminal cases connected to the hit and run appear to be ongoing, so the consequences for Garcia and Martinez-Leal have yet to be seen. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Sued for saving a life. When 83-year-old Beatrice Wiseman went into cardiac arrest at a Maryland hospital in August 2013. Staff members sprang into action and saved her life. They were unaware that Wiseman and her husband William had signed paperwork permitting William to make medical decisions if she was rendered incapable of doing so, or that the papers included a clause to let Wiseman pass away if her heart or lungs failed. Wiseman had recently suffered 2 strokes and had been in the hospital for 2 weeks when staff members found her turning blue in her room. Their efforts to revive the senior citizen left her with broken ribs and collapsed lungs, and the family was reportedly traumatized after learning that Wiseman's end-of-life wishes weren't respected. In the wake of the incident, Wiseman's son, Christian, sued the hospital for violating what was supposed to be an ironclad agreement not to resuscitate the elderly woman. While the employees undoubtedly thought they were doing the right thing by saving Wiseman's life, it simply wasn't what she or her loved ones wanted due to her ailing health. The lawsuit requested $250,000 for Wiseman's ongoing medical needs, plus $180,000 for every year that she continued to live. It may sound cruel to put a cost on someone's life, but Wiseman's medical care was extremely expensive. She spent months in the hospital following her brush with death and was bedridden for a while after her release. And while she regained some of her mobility, she continued to suffer from dementia and other issues, which significantly decreased her quality of life.
9. Cory Bernard Moss. 31-year-old Rachel Poole was pregnant when her husband, Army Private Justin Pele Poole, was deployed overseas in 2013. She was 9 months along and preparing to give birth when an intruder interrupted a FaceTime call between her and Justin one day. Rachel recognized the man as the couple's friend, Cory Bernard Moss, and repeatedly screamed his name to Justin. Moss had broken into Rachel's Texas home when nobody was there and waited for her to return. He attacked her with a knife and tackled her to the floor, but the mum-to-be wasn't about to make it easy for the intruder. She fought back as hard as she could, and it's likely the main reason why both she and her baby survived. Moss admitted to attacking Rachel because he owed the couple money after damaging a car he borrowed from them. When he failed to pay the $3,000 in a timely fashion, Rachel contacted his superiors in the military, and they ordered Moss to pay the debt. Instead, he viciously attacked her in her own home and also put her baby's life on the line. The disgraced ex-soldier apologized in court, but many doubted his sincerity, especially since he tried to claim that he didn't know Rachel was pregnant. Moss also seemed to pity himself more than anything, stating that he wanted to leave the military and move to New York, but was struggling financially. He was angry that Rachel expected him to cover the car repairs, even though he was the one who damaged the vehicle. In the end, Moss was found guilty of the stabbing and was consequently sentenced to 30 years in prison. 8. Gavin Smith and Rebecca Walker. Investigators in Elkview, West Virginia, walked in on a real-life horror scene at a local residence in late 2020, where they encountered the remains of 4 people who'd been shot execution-style. The victims were identified as 37-year-old Daniel Dale Long, 39-year-old Risa Mae Saunders, and 2 other family members who were under the age of 18. Police were called to the scene after Risa's father, Timothy, discovered the carnage when he went to the residence to check on the family. He hadn't heard from them in a while and had grown concerned about their well-being. And as if losing 4 loved ones wasn't painful enough, Timothy also has to cope with the fact that his grandson, Gavin Smith, was the top suspect in the quadruple murder. At the time, Smith was dating a girl named Rebecca Walker. Both of the teen's parents disapproved of the relationship and banned the pair from seeing each other. They continued to talk secretly through text messages and video chats, but it wasn't enough for the young couple. Smith tried running away to be with Rebecca several times, but kept getting picked up by the local sheriff's office. They eventually decided that the only way they could be together was by killing some of Smith's family members. On the day of the murders, Smith showed Walker a gun and knife he planned to use during a video call. Walker then told her boyfriend to hurry up and get the killings over with, and at some point, the screen went black, but the call remained active. Smith then returned to the chat after he was done murdering the victims. Law enforcement quickly caught up with the teens, who are likely kicking themselves now for thinking that they would ride off into the sunset together and somehow avoid the consequences for their actions. Walker took a deal and pleaded guilty to 4 counts of accessory to first-degree murder after the fact. She admitted in court that she encouraged Smith to commit the murders. Smith was convicted of all 4 murders and received 3 life sentences as a result. 7. Thomas Scully Powers. Around 20 people were participating in a Zoom conference one day in 2020 when they noticed that one of the participants, 72-year-old Dwight Powers, suddenly went off screen. The senior citizen who was attending the meeting from his home in Amityville, New York, was seen falling and disappearing from view. He could then be heard breathing heavily. One of the Zoom participants called the police, but they didn't know Dwight's address, so it took law enforcement a little longer than usual to figure out where he lived. But eventually, they made it to the man's home. Officers arrived as Dwight's 32-year-old son, Thomas Scully Powers, was attempting to flee the scene. He jumped out of a second-story window and was injured, but he managed to run from the police for the next hour before he was caught. In the meantime, officers discovered Dwight dead and nearly decapitated on the floor, with more than a dozen stab wounds to his neck, back, and torso. The killer had attacked the victim with such force that they repeatedly swapped out the kitchen knife they were using for another one because the blades kept bending. During questioning, Scully Powers allegedly admitted to murdering his father. However, he pleaded not guilty to the charge. Unfortunately, it's unclear where the case currently stands. 6. Zoel ONeal. 61-year-old yoga teacher Maud Steenbeek was Skyping with her brother one evening in 2020 when a man barged into her Melbourne, Australia home and beat her to death. Steenbeck's brother saw the intruder approaching, then heard his sister scream before the call was cut off. He phoned Steenbeek's sons and urged them to hurry over to their mother's house. The woman's son, Adam, arrived less than 2 minutes later. He saw 28-year-old Zoel ONeal standing over the victim's motionless body, rambling nonsensically. Unsure whether his mother was still alive, Adam grabbed a baseball bat and went inside with his dog. The canine dragged ONeal out of the house, and Adam struck him with the bat to incapacitate him while waiting for help to arrive. ONeal lived near Steenbeek, but the two didn't know each other. He had a lengthy history of severe mental health issues and psychiatric hospitalizations. His housemates told police that in the lead-up to the crime, he was manic, experiencing extreme mood swings, and doing strange things like trying to climb into a storm drain. Neighbors noticed ONeal crouching and acting unusual in the street right before the attack. Several people called the police, but unfortunately, officers didn't reach the scene until after the onslaught, when the emergency calls took on a much more urgent tone. ONeal was found not guilty of murder due to mental impairment, which means instead of punishment, he'll receive rehabilitation. He was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane, and there's a possibility that he could see freedom again if his mental health is restored. At his sentencing, his lawyer gushed about how his condition had improved so dramatically that he could be well enough for release in just a year. Thankfully though, the judge scoffed at the suggestion, and many, if not most, are hoping ONeal remains locked up for years to come. 5. Van Brisban. After noticing that her mother's boyfriend was acting weird in the middle of the night at the family's home in Humble, Texas one day in 2022, a young woman named Lauren Yuma FaceTimed her mum and sister in order to voice her concerns. She told them that the man, 60-year-old Van Brisban, was standing in her room in the dark and was refusing to go away. Her mum, Laurie Young, told Brisban to leave the room, but then she heard Lauren screaming for help, saying that he had a gun. Afterward, the call ended abruptly. Lauren's mum, who was out of town on a work trip, dialed 911 and Harris County deputies rushed to the scene. They heard screaming and 2 gunshots as they approached the home. Moments later, Brisban walked outside and said, "Do what you have to do." He also appeared to be pulling up his pants when he exited the residence. Inside the house, deputies found Lauren dead from gunshot wounds. Young told local station KHOU that she didn't understand how or why her boyfriend of 5 years turned on her daughter. Until then, Brisban had always gotten along well with Lauren and treated her like one of his own children. As a result, he was charged with murder. But because this happened so recently, the case is ongoing and Brisban has yet to be sentenced for his crimes. 4. Samuel Forz. A 19-year-old woman was FaceTiming with her boyfriend while walking through Leeds city centre in England in 2019 when a man approached her from behind and attacked her. Luckily though, the girl's boyfriend snapped a screenshot of the suspect right before the woman's phone was smashed and subsequently called the police. He felt helpless since he wasn't there to protect his girlfriend, but the photo would ultimately prove helpful in identifying the suspect. The attack lasted for 15 minutes and left the victim with significant facial and dental injuries, along with some scrapes and bruises. Members of the public found the woman bleeding and partially clothed in the street. She told a police officer that she was in so much pain she thought she was going to die. The victim said that her attacker had asked her for her phone number earlier that evening and she politely declined. During the assault, he punched her in the face and stomped on her, and when she asked him to stop, he smirked and continued brutalizing her. Authorities arrested 27-year-old Portuguese national Samuel Forz, a known schizophrenic with a lengthy rap sheet. And, in the end, he was found guilty of the attack and received a life sentence with a minimum of 8 years. 3. Emily Auta. 36-year-old Garrett Wilhelm was on a video call at his Las Vegas home one night in 2021 when his wife, 36-year-old Emily Auta, shot him to death. While the shooting wasn't captured on camera, the person Jarrell was chatting with overheard the violence and called the police. Auta dialed 911 and told responding officers that she'd returned home from walking her dog and found her husband dying on the floor with the gun next to him. She suggested that perhaps he accidentally discharged the weapon while cleaning it. However, surveillance and doorbell camera footage from nearby proved that she was lying about walking her dog, and a neighbor told investigators that they heard the couple arguing shortly before the shooting. Other aspects of Auta's story simply didn't add up with the evidence, and she was subsequently charged with Jarrell's murder. Auta entered an Alford plea to second-degree murder, which means that she maintains her innocence, but admits that the prosecution most likely has a strong enough case to secure a conviction. She was later sentenced to 10 to 25 years behind bars for the crime. And to this day, Auta's motives for killing her husband are unclear. 2. Garrett Wilhelm. Christmas Eve will forever mark a day of tragedy for two families after a deadly car accident in Denton County, Texas claimed one life and ruined another in 2014. 20-year-old Garrett Wilhelm was traveling south on Interstate 35W to go see his parents when he got distracted and failed to notice that traffic had stopped in front of him. His nearly 5,000-pound SUV barreled straight into a much smaller Toyota Camry at full speed. Then Wilhelm's vehicle went up and over the car, which was carrying married couple James and Bethany Modisette, as well as their two kids. Sadly, one of the children didn't make it, and the rest of the family members sustained serious injuries as a result of the crash. While combing the wreck site, police found Wilhelm's iPhone fully intact. The FaceTime app was running, indicating that the young man was likely video chatting and was distracted at the time of the incident. In 2020, after years of court delays, Wilhelm pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter as part of a plea deal. He was sentenced to 110 days in county jail followed by 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay $60,000 in restitution to the victims. The judge also granted deferred adjudication, which means that he'll avoid a felony conviction if he complies with the terms of his plea deal. If he fails to comply, he could face the full penalty for the crime, which carries a prison sentence of up to 20 years. At his sentencing hearing, Wilhelm apologized to the Modisette family. He said that he thinks about the victim who lost their life and the impact his actions have had on the surviving family members every single day. He also claimed that he planned to dedicate the rest of his days to saving lives. In a victim impact statement, James Modisette was at a loss for what to say to the man who brought so much suffering to his family. He wrapped up his short speech by stating, "If it weren't for Jesus, I wouldn't be standing here right now looking at you." 1. Joshua Cooper. In November 2022, 911 operators in Bensalem, Pennsylvania received a call from a concerned mother who said that a young man had shown her daughter a dead body during an Instagram video chat. The mum had overheard the suspect, later identified as Joshua Cooper, stating that he'd killed someone before flipping the camera to show someone's bloody legs and feet. He then asked the young woman to help him dispose of the body. After receiving the disturbing report, officers went to Cooper's home at a local trailer park, where he was seen fleeing from the back of his mobile home. Inside the trailer, they found the lifeless body of a female on the bathroom floor. The victim appeared to have been fatally shot. Cooper reportedly told police that the gun he used was locked in a safe on the property, and he also allegedly claimed that the shooting was an accident. During questioning, he said that the victim came over to watch Netflix that afternoon and got up to use the bathroom. However, after saying this, he stopped talking at his mother's urging, so it's unclear exactly what happened next. Authorities consequently charged Cooper with criminal homicide, possessing instruments of crime, and tampering with evidence. But since this case is so recent, an outcome has yet to be reached.
Would you rather have your foot run over by a car while trying to help an old lady cross the street, or be robbed of the $500 you were carrying after offering a ride to a stranger in the pouring rain? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.